Right. Thank you everyone for coming. This is the first steering committee meeting for the South Stoner Prairie Neighborhood Plan. So I guess I'll start off by thanking everyone for being willing to participate in this process. It'll be important for setting the tone for what this neighborhood will look like going forward. So, and it's an important process for the city's expansion of the urban service area when that time comes. So thank you everyone. I think, I don't know if you want, Jason, I can just turn it over to you. I think what we're planning on talking about kind of what to expect from the process, do introductions, talk about what everyone wants to get out of this, and go from there. So.
Yeah, if you don't mind, we're going to do introductions of our team and staff and wait on your introductions for just a little bit, and then we'll get through that and have it be more than just a simple name introduction round. So,
I'll start. I've communicated with all of you over email, but I am Brad Sipple. I'm the Community Development Planner for the City of Fitchburg. I've been here a little over a year, and this is one of my first big projects that I started after starting here. So, nice to meet you all, and look forward to getting this underway.
I'm Jason Valerius, team leader and senior planner with MSA. I have, along with Steve Tremlett, my colleague, worked on several neighborhood plans with the city over the past decade plus, and so bringing a fair amount of experience in doing this work here specifically. With me tonight is Brad Valscanner. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm an associate planner at MSA. Recently started. I'm also taught quite a bit at UW-Madison in landscape architecture and urban planning, so I have a broad background of neighborhood planning from the ground up and top down from both the public and private side of things. And I also have the background of broader landscape design plans and how that meshes with urban design and kind of urban wildlife interface and more ecological planning aspects of some of the design aspects we get into as we work through these neighborhood plans. I'm also live right on the edge of Fitchburg and Madison on Todd Drive, so that's also kind of an interesting aside. I get to operate and like work on projects in my backyard, so this is an exciting project for me as well.
Not here tonight is Steve Tremlett. Steve is actually the project manager and is more often going to be leading these meetings through the process. Steve got himself COVID, I think for the first time finally, and so he's staying home tonight. I myself am just getting over a bit of a cold, but I'm feeling better, and it's not COVID, so I'm here. Also on the screen is Emily Soderberg, another planner on our team that will be involved with the process. Not on the screen are various other technical experts at MSA. Part of this project is taking a good hard look at some of the technical aspects of the land, of the planning area, including especially stormwater and traffic. So we are trying to do a reasonably good job of understanding now before specific development proposals might come forward what can work here, what people want, what the interests are, and use that to develop a plan. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but just to talk in broad terms about this project, what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to give a quick overview here, then we'll go around and talk about, do a round of introductions and kind of hear from each of you where you're coming from into this process so we understand your individual perspectives. And we've been doing some work on existing conditions. We've got a bunch of maps to kind of roll through and just talk about what we know so far about the study area. And we'll wrap up with some discussion about that and discussion about issues and opportunities that you guys see, vision ideas for the planning area. So when we talk about the process, largely we talk about opportunities for you and others to influence and be part of the project and the process. So there'll be a series of steering committee working meetings. This is the first of 6 that are planned. And so you guys are kind of the core working body for this effort. But we'll have an online survey. We'll have several open house and public input meetings. We're going to do some interviews, which we're just working on getting set up, including a focus group specifically focused on developers. So having a conversation about kind of what's going on in the market and what people are see as viable for this land in particular. And we'll be touching base with Plan Commission and ultimately Council on adoption of the plan. That process looks like this. It's about a year. We said 16 months. We've already been working a bit, so we're already partway into the process. But right now we're in October, and it's an every other month kind of thing for you guys that we're anticipating. So, and we'll come back and we'll look at this at the very end of the meeting. We can talk a little bit more about schedule before we hang it up for the night. The very generalized purpose for the plan is to anticipate and accommodate growth of the city. Meeting the city's land use needs as the city grows, and in a very particular logistical way, setting up for preparing for an application to expand the urban service area. So a particular wrinkle with this project and the parallel project that we have running right now for planning area on the east side of the city, for the Greenfield area, is that we are collaborating with Capital Area Regional Plan Commission to kind of lay the groundwork to make that process for amending the urban service area very simplistic, because they're here at the table with us and we're collecting the data and doing the evaluations that need to happen for that process to occur. So we've got a little information here about what is the urban service area. I'm not sure if anyone in the room here or on the committee has questions about that, but the Capital Area Regional Plan Commission is the entity that helps to review and is kind of a gatekeeper in collaboration with the DNR on where sewer and water in particular can be extended to, and thereby becomes an important piece of the approval process in allowing for the outward growth of the city. So right now that red boundary represents where the sewer and water can currently be served, and that is lines up with the edge of the planning area. If I back up to show this, we don't have these in the same place at the same time right now on this map, but the northern edges, northern and western edges of the planning area line up with the edges of the urban service area right now. The green on this map is natural resource or environmental corridors. So that was it for project introduction, and now's a chance to go around the room. And as I said, we'd like for more than just introductions. We'd like to hear who you are affiliated with, and that might be more than one type of affiliation that you think is relevant here. And if you could share some reflection on what interest you bring to the table or what interest you represent and what you're particularly attuned to in this process. I think that'd be helpful to us, certainly, and I think to the rest of the community to kind of understand where everyone's coming from today. Can I start on my left?
Sure. I'm Carol Poole. I've been involved in city government since 2009 in one way or another. I've been on the Plan Commission on and off since 2009, or 2011, I'm sorry. So I am back on Plan Commission now. I am the Plan Commission representative to this body. What I'm looking for in this is to make sure that the development that we're following is going to be compatible with the development to the north. We just did a comprehensive plan amendment for the North Stoner Prairie neighborhood, and there was a lot of neighborhood interest, if you will, at the meeting. And I think that they are also going to be very interested in this process to see what's gonna develop to the south. I'm also very interested in stormwater in this area because it's been a horrible problem for years with Goose Lake having all of the flooding and the flooding underneath 18 and 151. I think stormwater is gonna be a very important component to this. As a person who's lived in Fitchburg since 1988, I would also like to see this neighborhood retain some of its rural character. I think so much of the new development is so urban looking, and I think if we're going to focus our urban area on the eastern edge of the city, I would like to see, as we move to the west and to the south, to see how much of that urban or that rural character that we can maintain. And I think, through landscape architecture, I think is gonna play a big part in that, but I think even just views and trees and distances between buildings, I know that's not always the correct way to think about planning these days. However, I think as we get closer to being if we're bringing rural into the urban, I think it needs to have a better transition than I've seen in some areas. So that's me. And I say what's on my mind, so I'll apologize in advance.
Thank you, Carol.
No.
Meredith Shelton. I would like to echo a lot of what Carol said. I actually live in the Elan Apartments, so I was invited by Joyce Fry to be part of the committee as someone who lives close by where this neighborhood will be. I'm excited about the Lacey Road improvements over there and excited to be able to travel on that again. So I'm very interested, I guess, from the aspect of transportation in and out of that area and how that will be impacted. Stormwater is definitely a huge thing based on where I've worked and lived in Fitchburg, traveling a lot on Fitchrona Road and always kind of stopping and thinking about whether or not it can take Fitchrona Road based on how much it has rained. So just looking to kind of make I agree with especially the neighborhood so I'm blanking on what the neighborhood is called at South Seminole and Lacey there on the northeast corner, with very close houses, no yards. There are some advantages to first-time homeowners, but it also does create a very, very tight urban feel. And if we can kind of soften that, maintain some trees, I think that would be very beneficial to the community.
Thank you.
Al Brzak, I'm with Edgewood College, former director of athletics there, now associate VP for athletic planning and development, and been with the institution since December of '99. The most obvious thing is we've recently purchased a chunk of the O'Brien property, 40 acres there at Seminole and Lacey. What some people may not know about that project is, we've heard water management brought up. A big chunk of that project is water management in that area. That is a bowl. It collects water, and that's been proven. We've been able to run the numbers, and we can go consecutive 200-year floods easily and handle that bowl. And so what we're proposing there, certainly will have an impact on the entire region, on all three of those neighborhoods around there. Restoring the wetland there that sits on the corner that many people may not realize actually has been there is a part of that. And then from two things from our standpoint that we've been committed to is, one, looking at the developing that's gone on around there and how do we provide our property when it's finished being developed as green space for community members utilizing that wetland. And then the other thing, to Carol's point, is there is significant farming history in Fitchburg. It's a delicate balance to try and maintain that history, and that's something that we've We've spent the last year since we purchased the land on trying to understand that history with, the families that are there and trying to find ways where we can honor that history. And I would hope that we would continue to do that as we work through that area. I mean, farming is disappearing in our country as is, so maybe somebody will be able to read how it was one day.
Excellent, thank you, Al.
Greg Clint Winninger, I'm the Land Resources Manager at Payne and Dolan. Been at Payne and Dolan for almost full 29 years now, so pretty much since day one when I got hired, I worked with Billy Buglis, which some of you may know, and he's mentored me a lot throughout my years here. But one of the first projects I had working with him was actually in the O'Brien property, seeing if there was any sand or gravel, pretty much where the wetland scrape is now. So I have a long history here, and I've seen, you might not know who I am and see my face. I've been here working behind the scenes, if you would at least, and seeing how the community has changed over that time. It's unbelievable, the growth that has happened. I used to live, I'll be honest, I'm not a resident of the area anymore. I worked for 4 years and lived on the west side of Madison until I started working here. Now I live in Waukesha. Maybe I bring a little different perspective in that case too. That may be helpful, but the whole area has really grown, and I can see some of the challenges that have occurred because of that. But I think we've also been part of the solutions for some things already with the stormwater in particular. We were involved with the wetland scrape, which provided that regional wetland area, and then also just recently with the Lacey Road project was working with the city on a TLE for the stormwater from that project that then is going to also work with the development that was already approved for through the CDP process for that area. So yeah, I can definitely feel how that works together. So, but as a stakeholder here, because we're one of the primary landowners here, we're interested to see what the next step is once the mineral extraction operations are coming to the point where it's time to reclaim the land and put it to another different use, if you would. I often tell people we're transitional architects of the land, if you would. We're only using it for a while for the use we are, then we're putting it back to something that's going to be beneficial in one way or another. So I'm really interested. I haven't been involved with this process before. Billy took care of the North Stoner one, so I sort of behind the scenes listened to what was happening, so I'm really curious to see how that goes and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm Robin Loger with Air Materials. I've been with them for going on 18 years, and prior to that, I was with Hammersley Stone Company, the long-time contractor in Fitchburg area. I was with them as operations manager there for almost 25 years. So I've been around Fitchburg for numerous years. We purchased the Richardson farm several years ago. And when we purchased that, we were approached by several people from the city of Fitchburg about development of that area. And it was proposed to have this committee and to develop all these properties off, work together to get out of it what Fitchburg would like to see out of it also. So I think it's a unique opportunity for the property that's there. We're starting from scratch, and we're all here together to make it pleasing for everyone. So we're very happy to be involved in it, and we look forward to working with the city and everyone else here with it also.
Thank you. We've got a couple of people online. I guess we'll start at the top with Steve.
I wish I was there in person to see you and be at the table. I'm Steve Steinhoff. I'm the agency director of the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. And Jason gave a little bit of an overview of the reason and for our involvement in this process. We are working to shift our focus from the back end of the planning process after the plans have been made and adopted locally, then go to the sewer service area for the first review, first time the commission and CARPC sees it, to the or this stage of the planning process where we can work on with you all and the part of the process to ensure that the criteria required for approval of sewer service area or urban service area boundary amendments are met and put in place, and then at the back end to make the process less cumbersome and more go faster and easier for everybody. So that's what our interest is. This is one early project that we're working on to test this approach out, and we hope to learn from this and apply it elsewhere. So appreciate your having us on board. Look forward to working with you all.
And then Chad?
Hi, everybody. Chad Weezy. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Verona Area School District. I oversee business and operations for the entire school district, and that does include long-range planning, including long-range facilities planning, along with enrollment projections and growth projections for our district as we continue to, in the future, add square footage for our growing attendance area. So certainly interested in what that will bring for new students to our district and timelines related to it. We also recently just purchased 60 acres, the Lacey Farm across from Savannah Oaks and Stoner Prairie, and continue to have an interest in making sure our Fitchburg residents are represented in the Verona area, the area part of the Verona Area School District. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Chad. And thank you, Steve, too. I think that just leaves Brian, right?
Yeah, hi, can you see me okay?
Yep.
Great. I'm Brian Moeller. I was asked by Joyce Fry to be a part of this as I'm a current resident in the Stoner Prairie neighborhood. Previously was a resident of the Quarry Hill neighborhood, and I currently work for USONA Institute, which is a part of Promega here in Fitchburg. So Fitchburg through and through. I probably couldn't tell you the first thing about city planning, but in my career previous, I worked with biohealth startups, and frequently would help them try to track down lab space in Fitchburg, Verona, or other neighboring areas. So hoping to learn a little bit more about the back end of this process, but also as a Stoner Prairie resident, this whole neighborhood has been changing really, really quickly. So very interested to see kind of what's on the table for South Stoner Prairie here.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone. I think I'm excited about the diversity of interests that we have here in the group. I think this is a really good group to be tackling a project like this and to help guide the process. Before I launch into going through some maps and kind of sharing some of the things that we think we know so far, anything that you would add or comment on?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think you've covered it really well so far, Jason.
All right, so feel free if you want to jump in, anyone here in the room online, to ask questions about anything here. By all means, please do. So this is kind of, all of these are data that we pulled, and in some cases they're just starting to be a little bit behind the times, and this existing land use map is an example in that that pink swath down the middle represents the existing Panandolan mineral extraction area. And while still accurately representing the current use of the land, we are expecting immediately to the east of that, to the right on this map, another area which is the what's called officially the Fitchburg Hills, but the Yara Materials site. So a big chunk of this area is currently or will be mineral extraction. And that represents an interesting challenge and opportunity. We heard a bit about how, and we know that the Yahara Material Site is a new one, and it's just been approved with a plan for its restoration. However, the intent is that at the end of this process, we will amend, or that plan will be amended to go, instead of restoring that, kind of the default is you restore that to more or less prior conditions. The intent will be to restore to developed conditions, and to have the extraction process potentially preparing for that developed outcome appropriately with certain areas that would need, for example, underground utilities, blasted out and ready for those. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to be thinking about here, which is an interesting and somewhat unique wrinkle on this process. Balance of the area, of course, is primarily agricultural, actively tilled land with a few woodlands. So that being just a snapshot of current use. Ownership, we've kind of talked about. We've got a small set of owners that are directly within the planning area here. And then zooming out a little bit to talk about the transportation network here. I don't know if I can easily use my, it's a little bit small, but just to point out a few things. So we're going to be doing some traffic counts just to make sure we've got sort of a current representation baseline against which we will consider and project the need for improvements to the system as development occurs. My cursor isn't all that visible, but the two places we're going to get traffic counts, waiting a couple of weeks until after Lacey has been reopened, are really at the east and west ends of this segment of Lacey that we would be touching. So where Lacey intersects with Fitchburg and where Lacey intersects with Seminole. There are traffic counts represented here on this map. So we've got some sense of baseline, but we felt it was worthwhile having a current snapshot of those two intersections that are going to be most impacted. We do, as we've talked about it initially, most of the flows to and from this area we anticipate are going to be to and from the north. That's where, that's where people live, that's where people work. To some extent, you could see some trips that are headed over to Verona, right? We've got commercial areas both on the east end and the southeast corner of the city of Verona, and so you'll see some people headed back and forth from there, but predominantly we're expecting, pending further analysis and discussion, we're expecting that most of the trips are going to be to and from the north, where most of the rest of the metro area is.
When are you planning on doing those traffic counts?
After Thanksgiving.
Okay, so giving folks enough time to get back into the habit of using a wider road now because everybody's found a new way to get around?
Yeah, so we're going to let it.
Yeah, because the numbers will be skewed otherwise.
They will,
Okay.
they will. And we've got new connectivity then with Commerce Park Drive is connected. And so, there's going to be some new habits developing. And so we're going to let it sit for at least a few weeks before we do that.
Do we by any chance have a copy of Verona's comprehensive plan so we know what their plan is for the area that's adjacent to this?
We'll get to that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's it for now on traffic. I think there are, as we've been talking about it internally, the nice thing about this area, I would say, is that people have choices. That does make it more complex to evaluate and analyze, to figure out, all right, if someone's going ultimately, toward downtown Madison, what are they going to pick? Are they going to go up Seminole and hop on the Beltline off of Seminole? Are they going to find their way onto Verona Road, onto the freeway? And if so, by which route are they going to get there? Because there are, at least 3 different alternatives to do that, and people are going to find what works for them, and it's going to be varied responses to that question. But those are some of the things that we'll be thinking about. But again, ultimately, we're especially concerned about the nearest intersections and planning for improvements and safety enhancements there.
Can I give you a quick note for that?
Yes, please.
Your notes?
Yes.
As part of the DOT committee that I was on,
Yeah,
they had talked about that the eventual plan is to eliminate the ramps at Seminole Highway on and off. So that might be something that we can research, find out if that's still a plan, and then see how that will impact any traffic.
yeah, and so the elimination of the ramps at Seminole would come with also the elimination of the access at, the one stoplight that's on that segment to the south. It's all, but like, so it's that next phase, it's like phase 3, I think.
Please, whatever.
And it's not scheduled, it's not budgeted, right? But it's out there. So, yes, thank you, Carol. Some of the natural resource things, there's not much showing up on this map. In terms of steep slopes, it's really just kind of artificial steep slopes within the mining area. There aren't any DNR mapped wetlands within the planning area. There's some bits of color here. In the northeast corner, there's a bit of green. In the southeast, or excuse me, the northwest, there's some blue, and there are scattered bits of orange. These are our MSA's own internal kind of map, aerial photo-based evaluation of risk areas based on just looking at, what's recognizable just by studying the aerial photo. So the only one that we're kind of actively a little bit interested in, primarily interested in from a planning perspective, is that little bit in the northeast corner. That didn't show up in prior, the prior permitting for the site. It's probably nothing, but we're going to take enough of a look at it to confirm that we agree that there's not really anything there. Related then is the question of stormwater, where stormwater goes. And several of you, most of you, raised that as a topic of concern. We heard the issues with both watersheds here. And so that red line that goes north and south roughly through the planning area represents that watershed split between what's going east and what's going west. As several of you know, what goes east is flowing into an area that is very flat and does not drain well. And that will have some impact on release rates and the need for keeping water on site longer and trying to infiltrate that water more. On the westbound, the issue is those flooding issues with Fitchburg Road and Goose Lake, which were evaluated in detail fairly recently. There was a stormwater study specifically looking at where, where some of those issues were occurring and potential solutions. And this is something that's been, I think, known for a while. So if I proceed to this next slide, which is something that shows up in the, I think this is the most recently adopted Parks Plan. There's this Badger Mill Creek natural area, which if you kind of bounce back and forth between these two, you can see that lines up pretty cleanly with, that is the watershed that's flowing down into Goose Lake from this area. And so that's, it's on people's minds for sure, the risks of flooding, the effect on Goose Lake, solutions that may be required. I know there's some discussion in this study about the potential that the Goose Lake outlet would need modification to prevent continued flooding or severity of flooding in Goose Lake. So that's something that we'll be looking at as we get deeper into talking about the stormwater impacts. Which then brings us to the question of, well, what is Verona planned? On the left is coming from the town of Verona's plan, and then the right from the city of Verona's plan. So the town of Verona indicated with that area in orange a rural residential growth area, and then assumed the rest was farmland preservation. That plan is several years old now, as is the city of Verona's plan. The city of Verona's plan is a little bit more generic and just identifies all of that as a future growth area. In a topic for conversation hanging out there is this thing that I've identified in the lower right here, highlighted in yellow, which is just a note in their plan saying that the city of Verona may wish to establish some type of area of separation with the city of Fitchburg to the east. That's a conversation that was a favorite topic of Kathleen Falk back in the day, talking about community separation zones and trying to maintain distinguishable communities that have some green space between them. The implementation of that is hard because each community is growing and is approaching what tends to be a transportation corridor, and then is asked to asking themselves, well, are we going to hold ourselves back from that? Are we going to be the ones to keep open space next to this transportation corridor? Does that really make sense for us? And so now Fitchburg is in that conversation for yourselves. Does this make sense on your side to be playing a part in trying to maintain some separation ultimately long-term between Fitchburg and Verona? And part of that conversation is going to be related to then this, the watershed issue. Part of it's going to be related to interests of community character that we heard earlier from several of you about, what is the character going to be out here? Are we urban everywhere, or is there variety that we can take some areas and say, well, we're going to develop, but we're going to develop in a way that is distinctively a little bit less urban. So that's something for discussion. Certainly, from the regional perspective, I think if I could represent what Steve Steinhoff might say is, regionally we are trying to do what we can to stay compact when we develop, to develop with greater density, and in so doing, to not go outward as quickly. And I think we have to be careful in trying to create some areas that are less dense, in not getting caught in the trap of saying, well, this area here is the edge, and so it should be a transition out to farming, because long term, it's probably not really the edge, it's just the current edge. I think the area in pink on this map is also interesting. So we had discussion today at a staff level focused on the greenfield side, because that pink area comes across, it's off the map, but it overlaps with part of the greenfield area on the east side. And with both of these areas, the city identified them as areas of interest for protection, but then there's been general acknowledgement that there's no money there associated with that intent to actually pay for buying the land. And so we have to figure out as we go, if we want a corridor through here for multiple purposes, for trails, for wildlife, for variety in the landscape, how are we going to achieve that? And I think that question is one that we're going to be tackling in this process too. One other map I think I have here is this Fitchburg agricultural route. And this is worth noting because, so that's a map, of course, of the entire city, but the idea here is that this corridor, the Seminole Highway corridor, has some history to it. This is the Badger State Trail and runs, continues past the end of Seminole Highway and goes out for miles and miles. In fact, I rode it just this fall for the first time, so that was fun. But and saw some of that history. So there used to be a train depot out there a little ways, and there's still a cluster of housing out there that is part of that history. This plan, this agricultural route plan, is really focused on that corridor. Our planning area for South Stoner Prairie doesn't touch that corridor directly, but it overlaps the half-mile buffer around the trail, around Seminole Highway. And so I think that's something to consider. We heard someone mention view sheds. View sheds of that from the planning area, view sheds of the planning area from that corridor is something that, that we'll try to think about, because we're gonna be up on the hill, though some of that hill's coming down. So, all of that is kind of relevant to what is the character, what can people see, how does it affect the character of the land, both within and outside our planning area here. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we know, and I can bounce back to some of these for some further conversation here. Thank you for jumping in at times there, but I'd like more discussion. What do you guys see? What did that spark, that tour?
Can you go back to that area map, please?
This one? Or which
The
would,
one that shows our planning area.
yeah, just,
Sorry.
and there's several that do that.
Oh, gotcha. Do we have one that's just like one reason, what I'm looking for is Grandview Road.
Oh, yeah, so
Which
the
roads?
transportation map
Yep. There we go.
widens out a little bit.
Because what I'm wondering is, living in an area that I live in, which is very road locked, we have a hard time getting in and out. Especially if we're gonna be adding density in this area. I'm wondering, have there been any discussions, or can there be discussions between the town of Verona and the city of Madison about maybe upgrading Grandview so that can carry more traffic? Or even having it expanded through the city of Fitchburg as an alternate route to get to Seminole Highway. I think transportation's gonna be a big piece of this, along with the stormwater, and, it's nice to be able to see what Verona has planned, and, if they plan to add green space between us and them, that's, I guess, their prerogative. But I think we have to focus on what works for us.
Yes, I was just gonna add to one of your points is the connectivity piece about there's, road blocking in terms of limiting access to and from because you're surrounded by major thoroughfares or roads, but then there's also the idea of balancing connectivity with cut-through traffic, for instance. So connecting the neighborhood but not, drawing traffic through the neighborhood for some of that more random traffic that you see trying to bypass some of you saw during some of the road construction, to an extreme example, people are finding ways to get through most efficiently, but you want them to return to the places where they should go when all the road work's done. So you want to make sure that you're considering the ways to kind of connect that. I'm not sure, thinking about what the best ways of that, you mentioned outlining utility connections, but there's also an opportunity to utilize the quarry to sort of lay some of the foundation for where those connections are going to be if they're bigger roadways and thoroughfares that go into and across versus just on the edge.
So from a people moving standpoint, we'd potentially be better off trying to find a way to direct people's eyes to Seminole Highway, Lacey, and away from Grandview rather than making Grandview more appealing to them. Is that what you're saying?
I would say that would be up to you all and to part of this process in terms of what your goals are for getting people
Right, but if you do that, if you make Grandview bigger, then you're making it more appealing to people to use it as a thoroughfare.
But if they're gonna have people living in that area in the town of Verona on Grandview, they're gonna need to be able to get to Fitch-Verona.
Because it's the only road.
And Seminole Highway from PD north is not expandable on either side of the road.
I think
So it's
I think
always
it's one
gonna
of
be two
the
lanes.
points in talking about there's many ways that
Mm-hmm.
people can use. It's making some policy or maybe implementation decisions that's kind of this is the way we want people to go through these actions, making this a bigger corridor or more defined. This is where bike traffic and more complete street network, if you will, that moves people across versus this is just going to be a road into that neighborhood. And so you have some opportunities to be making those decisions and those design decisions to sort of direct how traffic and transportation is gonna flow through your neighborhood along the edges, both interior. So I think that that's important, whereas it's kind of divided now. There's not a lot of like primary traffic hubs. People kind of can pick and choose based upon which way traffic is on a daily basis.
Is it possible to study the traffic pattern or traffic count on Grandview now while people are inconvenienced with the others? Because that would give you a good sense of, at least closer sense of what's coming through there, because Lacey's not available.
Oh, so you're saying right now without.
Right, people are probably using it as a shortcut right now, so to get a better sense of what does the traffic look like and be able to project it out. Because to your point, Carl, there's nothing, like that's it, there's no other
Well, are
roads.
they using that to get to Verona? So
Right.
if you have people that live in this neighborhood that work at Epic, can they go that way instead of going back up the other way and overburdening the northern part? There's another connection to Verona, because right now there is no connection to Verona from Fitchburg. I don't know if any of you know that, but it's tough to get around up there. Hopefully it'll get better.
So it just may give some more accurate numbers to project out rather than just guessing.
Right.
Because you actually have a scenario right now where people are using a road that they normally wouldn't.
Did their comprehensive plan map show the residential density that they were planning for that area?
The towns did, the cities did not, so, and I would say that the city's intentions are more relevant than the towns. I think the city indicated generally that they consider this a residential area, but I don't believe we've got much in there. I think it was presumed to be details to work out later.
Okay, they didn't talk about what level of,
Not at specific level,
Okay.
no.
I will note though that the city and town of Verona are on our list of interviews to
Okay.
talk further with, so,
because that's gonna impact the schools too.
yeah.
Are we still trying to do those together? as one?
I think we're probably going to schedule them separately.
Okay. Just curious. They do have a boundary agreement, the city and the town, to guide that, and this is one of those areas that is covered by that agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, the decisions that people make about where, what route to take, are, as we all know, increasingly dictated by powers outside of our control. Google Maps tells you a lot, and it's gonna, that power is gonna increase over the years, right? In terms of the sensors and the real-time data that are out there to tell you like, oh, don't go here now because it's not busy yet, but it's going to be in 20 minutes based on past history, and so take this route. And that route might sometimes be down to Grandview, across, and then easy to hop on the highway, even if you're going north, maybe. But having that flexibility is just a good principle to work from, building in multiple routes, not having dead ends. Yes, we know we need to be careful about, how much traffic ends up going through neighborhoods, but also about, when the plan that we make, one of my pet peeves as a planner is when someone at the temporary end of a road gets upset about the extension of that road and new neighbors and new traffic from those new neighbors, as if that cornfield was going to be there forever. And of course it's not. So, clarity about those transportation connections is important to be in the plan.
And I expect there's going to be traffic access from that, from I guess the southwest corner of the new neighborhood directly onto Fitchburg.
Yeah, I would
Correct.
expect.
I guess a westbound exit.
Yes. That we should absolutely expect that there'll be connectivity
Sure,
through this area and a road connecting directly to Fitchburg.
Yeah,
Yep.
and even outside of Epic employees, as Carol mentioned, that's also how they're gonna get to Costco. so.
Yep.
It's-
Yeah, there's a lot of, as we say, trip generators in the surrounding area. And a lot, there are a lot of people who are gonna go to, Orchard Ridge, Target, Orchard Point, and Target and everything that's around Target, but yes, there are some unique destinations in Verona too. Other, kind of reactions, issues and concerns you see, or opportunities that you see? I'm certainly curious to learn more about what Edgewood has learned so far for your own site. And I don't think we have yet, we'd like to see more of your preliminary plans for the site, because that'll, of course, be relevant.
Happy to share them. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you guys aren't in this,
We are just to the right.
just adjacent to, right?
Just to the right.
Yeah, this.
Jason, I had a question. This is Steve, hi. To what extent are the city's population and employment projections, growth projections factoring into the planning? Are there certain portions of that projected growth that this neighborhood and the Greenfield neighborhood are expected to capture, or so just generally if and how that's being factored into this planning process?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Steve. And it really, I think, is a question of phasing, of when things happen, and how. So I think we start with, what makes sense for the growth of this area. Doing planning like this within one jurisdiction that is part of a larger metro area, we're trying to keep track of, well, what are the overall growth trends? And we all know that this is a high growth county, and that there's a lot of demand out there to be met somewhere. Fitchburg has historically kind of had a bit of a governor, so to speak, tried to manage the pace of development, in particular, I think of new land consumption. I forget what the time frame is, but it's 75 acres per
year, I think,
per year.
is our comprehensive plan imposed limit right now. And I'll add too that the FUDAs that these new neighborhood areas are based on, basically all of the established FUDAs which were done, that FUDA study was, I think, started in 2003.
And FUDA is?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Future Urban Development Area. So that's what, you'll hear that term a lot throughout this process. So, South Stoner Prairie is one, Greenfield is one, and we have, I think, 3 others that have not been studied yet, if I'm remembering correctly. Those were all kind of established in the 2009 comprehensive plan as accommodating Fitchburg's expected growth through, I believe it was 2050. Now, we've done updated population projections, based on the 2020 census and stuff since then. And we have looked at how they compare to our older population projections, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think they were, Fitchburg has grown faster than expected back then. So, the FUDAs that we have established so far were expected to carry our growth through 2050. But I also think that we have had maybe a bit more infill development in Fitchburg than was originally expected when those population projections were done too, more development along Fish Hatchery Road and stuff like that. So, I guess the long-winded answer to that is, Steve, is that yes, these FUDA areas are intended to kind of accommodate our expected population growth as kind of the expansion piece of it.
So how many acres are in this one then?
This one is 260, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So roughly 4 years worth on your average of 75.
Yeah.
So, population growth is one factor to consider. Because that's usually followed by residential, multifamily, or something of some kind, right? But what about growth in need of commercial, industrial, business park land, which usually offset the huge impact on residential that has on the school district?
Yeah.
You need sort of both in a decent proportion to really grow and not run into problems with that?
Yeah.
Is that factored in any way, or?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think that is I believe there are, I'd have to go back to our comprehensive plan and see if that was also projected in there. But that is definitely something that we expect these new neighborhoods to need to accommodate as land for employment growth as well. So.
As you know, of course, Clinton, that area immediately north of the study area was, the plans for that were recently revised with a comprehensive plan amendment to shift the boundary between residential use and business park use further west, closer to the existing neighborhood there, so that the final build out of that neighborhood shrank a little bit, and the balance of that then going to business park.
And I think through this process, we could see it potentially making sense for Commerce Park Drive to maybe extend into this neighborhood and having some sort of employment component as part of this neighborhood.
That certainly has been our impression and expectation headed into this before we did a whole lot of analysis, that makes sense, that a portion of this, I mean, there's, pretty good, we're getting a little further away from highway access, but still there's pretty good transportation connectivity here, that it still makes sense for business uses for part of this area.
And you mentioned before just Seminole, think about closing the off-ramps on that all completely, because that's the way I've gone for 29 years. So I'll find a way, but
I grew up in Tacoma and I live on the other side now. So.
yeah, but in some ways that's a huge contributor to traffic flow through here. Has there been any studies on how that impacts things? Because that might change or modify some of how you're looking at some of these FUDAs, right?
Yeah.
So, because I personally, that's the way I usually take, just because it's easy and it's not as congested as some of the other areas. But I also take a different route every time I go somewhere.
Yeah, fortunately, from a planning perspective, we know what we have with the interchange of Verona Road and PD, and McKee Road. That's been improved, and that's a very long-term improvement. It is what it is, and it's going to be there for a long time. So, if and when that phase 3, that change to the interchange of the Beltline with Verona Road becomes free flow, which is what would. So all the stoplights would go away with that, wouldn't it? And I mentioned the one, but it's also the stoplight at that interchange. That would go away too. There'd be a flyover for that westbound onto 18. You would go over the highway and come down and be free flowing through there. I think that's when the Seminole access would.
See, I live in that area, and that's the problem, is that then that neighborhood becomes completely landlocked. And that's what I don't want us to create here, which is why I brought it up.
Sure.
Is that we need to make sure people can get to the Beltline, because that is always gonna be the east-west corridor people wanna get to. And, 18151 has limited ramp opportunities between Fitchburg and Verona right now as it is. So we're gonna have people trying to get to the Beltline. And if they take away Seminole Highway, then Verona Road becomes the only option.
Right.
But then where are they even gonna get on Verona Road? Because if that stoplight goes away, the one that's on the hill, then there's no way to get on there.
The one that's on the hill, meaning?
The one that's on 18151 coming down the grade towards the Beltline.
Yeah, right.
So it's very restrictive is what I'm trying to say. So people would be able to get on at PD, they'd be able to get on 18151 and then take the curve around, but it's not gonna be very convenient, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and, with Seminole access going away, more trips are gonna go to the McKee Road interchange, and, congestion there could increase, which, so we're talking way out here, but the increase in heading down to Verona, across on Grandview, to pick up that on-ramp, or, down to the next one potentially, depending which way you're going, becomes probably more attractive in that case. And the network learns. People learn what the route of least resistance is.
Right, because, if you can't have access to get onto Verona Road except at PD, your next opportunity isn't going to be until Fish Hatchery Road. Push this traffic that way too. So it's just something to think, to keep
And I'm not sure how much that ends up affecting our choices
Yep.
in this area. When we did the planning for the Arrowhead area, which is the north side of McKee, on the east side of Verona Road, so up in here, we were very much concerned about how much infill could be put in there. This is that area that has Thermo Fisher back in there, and Thermo Fisher had land that still has land that's available for development. And part of that process was figuring out how much new use and new trips can we put in here, because there are limits. There are limits to how these intersections function. And we really spent a lot of time looking at that in that project. In this case, we will be adding to the overall network, but we're mostly focused on those nearby intersections as the one that are going to be most dramatically affected. And then it becomes such because there are options, it becomes a real challenge to say, well, we need to be really concerned about this intersection. There's going to be lots of intersections that will be affected, not just by what's happening here, but what's happening in Verona too. So it gets challenging, but I think that's, that phase 3, that change to the Verona Road to the highway, I think is way out. It might be as far out as the South Beltline plan, which is also an idea floating out there somewhere.
I've been in favor for that 29 years.
And, I'd say the general attitude about that is about highway improvements are very conflicted. I think there's broad understanding among many people that a lot of people know the story that when the Beltline was built, its long-term capacity projections were met almost right away, because it just sucked in trips from elsewhere. And there's a limit to our ability to design our way out of congestion. And we definitely want to do what we can to design good places where there's a lot of flexibility for people to meet needs nearby. I'm not being too Pollyannish about that. I recognize people still do drive and need to get around the region. But ultimately, we want to keep our eye on also designing good places every time we design places.
Well, even building on your comment there, even though it was designed to capacity right away, which was how many years ago, that didn't stop or slow down any growth around here. Really made no impact at that point in time. So, so just curious, end product wise, for what that's hopefully, regardless of the bits and pieces that go into it, I've looked at the North Storm Prairie plan. Is that something end product wise that we're hoping to get to with this whole process?
Yep.
So if we go back and relook at that just to familiarize it, that's sort of, okay.
Yeah, so, there's gonna be a bunch of material that is kind of background, our analysis, our, the technical side, but, documentation of our various parts of the process here. But ultimately, the bottom line is a land use map, with projections, for, densities and intensities of use, and, probably some design guidance for certain things that we're trying to achieve from a character standpoint, in the area.
In the past, these neighborhood plans have been incorporated into our comprehensive plan as part of it. It's either the end product will either be kind of a similar process there, or an adoption of the neighborhood plan, and then we're updating the future land use map of our comprehensive plan to reflect the the choices and everything that was made in this neighborhood plan to show that. And then, of course, every then policy decision is supposed to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, including zoning, so.
I would appreciate the opportunity to go around the room and kind of force everyone to offer some sort of thought about, what do you see, what would you like to see 20 years ago? 20 years from now, in this area. I mean, let's presume that 20-year window is a build-out scenario. What does this area look like 20 years from now? We don't have to go in order. I'll take volunteers out of order. I won't hold you to this. You don't have to keep this opinion.
I'm very good at putting caveats unless I decide to change my mind.
When I was teaching, for credit, we'd have these discussion questions, and you had to answer and turn in your badge. We had badges because we had different classes, different groups every time. But to get credit for that day answering the question, you had to answer the question and turn in your badge. And if you didn't respond, you didn't turn in your badge, so you didn't get credit. So, it was torturous for some. So.
I wouldn't mind seeing some sort of urban agriculture brought into this somehow. Maybe that would be a way of retaining some of the rural character, would be to maybe try to find a softer agricultural use, like maybe a community farmers market type area, kind of like, I think we have a barn that's out there, not too much further out the road, where they have events and things.
Would you, would a local or regional examples be something, are you familiar with like Troy Farms, Troy Gardens on the north side? It's on the north side of Madison, but it has it's almost like a community-supported agricultural site. It's a really interesting sort of model in terms of it kind of preserves a local rural character and sort of harkens back to some of the, so that it produces its own food on the site, and it has community gardens and also like a pretty compact housing component
Yeah,
as
I think
well.
that, when you're talking about that type of garden, and I think we have one that's right up where Edgewood's land is, isn't there a community garden there too?
Is that the Lacey garden?
Right at the corner of Seminole and,
Right next to the solar farms.
yeah, across from the solar farms. There've been those, but I mean, sometimes people think of those as, you've got, 18, 25, 30 people doing little bitty gardens with, and I'm thinking more on a commercial scale. Where someone would come in and actually, where it's a business, would come in, something more like Fitchburg Farms, down at the end of MM, where maybe not with big greenhouses, but maybe, some kind of a barn, and have an area where people can bring their vegetables to sell them, and, maybe a small growth operation or something, or maybe even a small, nicer looking greenhouse where people could buy their own plants to grow their own food. I mean, just something a little different, different types of commercial uses. It's like, I don't wanna see more strip malls with cell phone stores and, and I get mixed use is a big component sometimes of neighborhoods, but I'm not sure there's a lot of businesses that are really using those anymore. So the world has changed with Amazon and everything else. So what are things that people still like to do? They still like to drive to get produce. They still like to go somewhere where it's fun to take the kids, you know?
Mhm.
Areas like that, something that would make this neighborhood maybe a magnet and maybe the reflection of our rural character.
Given its location, it could be a unique opportunity for community gardens with a permanent farmer's market there that could run all year. I mean, even with an indoor component would pull people in, could be very unique, especially given that it's up on a hill, it's between Verona and everything, because the farmers markets are growing, but most of them are tiny.
Almost a Garber's feed mill,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
smaller, but.
Right.
Yeah,
but
the
that kind of
similar
restaurant- right, but that
concept.
kind of idea.
restaurant associated with it would be really
Right.
cool too.
Yes.
How are the adaptive, like it's, like they adapted an old like warehouse into a place where you can have events, but also grab food and rent out spaces.
But creating some type of opportunity where it might be you have a farmer's market and then maybe there is a barn or something looking that pays homage to the farming, but that becomes your center for farmers markets, things in the winter, things like that.
Skating rink.
Yeah, again, up on a hill, it would, you see a barn sitting up there, it would draw people in. It could create a unique opportunity that's not in the region, really.
Well, here's a
On
problem
the east side of it.
I always have, because I've been on the other side of it forever, usually coming in with things that people, a lot of what I've done for Panhandle over the last 30 years is, locating site gravel pits and quarries and that kind of things. And, sometimes, a lot of times for what we do, the materials are where they are, right? And that's, we never planned on that. So how do you take those good ideas, but then you gotta find the business side of it, somebody that wants to implement it, make it work.
We'll get Mike.
And that's hard because we don't know, because it might never happen, right?
Right.
But building enough flexibility to this planning process that, hey, if you can push it that way, great, but knowing that it might not. So what's the other alternatives that, people can come in and so it's just, because a lot of times things will just sit there because it's, I don't know how planners do it sometimes, because you're looking in your crystal ball for, how many ever years out, and balance those interests, because, especially with land in this area being at the price it's at, I don't know how all those things work.
Well, to go along with that, one of the things the mayor had talked about yesterday was the need for community centers, youth centers. There's an opportunity there, a community garden, a building that can be as a farmer's market could also potentially be a community center, a youth center. So I think there's some stuff that, there may be some symmetry that can achieve two objectives in this area, and I think there's probably some other ideas to that where the city has said, we need to figure out a way to do this. Okay, well, can you combine some resources then? To your point, because you don't want it just sitting empty, right?
Yeah.
We need to have the density to support that out there.
A market is something that has a lot of appeal to it, and it's really hard. So, if you've been watching the city of Madison try forever to get a public market, and it's on life support again because of cost issues, the current attempt. The city of Milwaukee has, at the north edge of the 3rd Ward, if you've ever been down there, the Milwaukee Public Market, which was intended as a fresh produce market. It evolved by market forces. When they create these markets, they try to say that they don't want prepared food. But that's exactly what it's become. It's become a very successful food court. And it's not, it's got a great quality and character to it. I think it's a great thing. Our office in Milwaukee is near there and we can walk to it and it's fantastic. But it is not really a fresh produce market. So it's a tough thing, but I think this is an idea worth exploring here. What does this look like? How do we create something that's actually tied to the earth, right? To production in some way? And how does that relate to the character of this area? These are ideas for us to come back to as we're working on this.
Yes, I'd like to see safe expansion. There's so many trails in Fitchburg that connect Fitchburg to so many areas. So a safe expansion of those trails, or just access to get to those trails, safe not only for walkers, for cyclists, but also for the vehicle traffic that is interacting with them, especially if, say, you're on the west side or east side of Fitzroy and needing to cross over, or vice versa, in order to get to trails. So I realize some of that will come from some collaboration with Verona, city and town. But even being in the Alon Apartments, again, with the expansion of Lacey Road and the improvements to Lacey Road there and the corresponding multi-use path is very exciting for us, because in order for us to get from where we are to maybe an eighth of a mile away to the Quarry Ridge, we're walking through grass or gravel along a very busy road, unless you want to walk through bike trails, which also is not a good option for either us or the trail bikers. So, yeah, I guess that I would want to make sure that that's something, because especially being with Wayland Road seeing improvements, there is a lot of cycle traffic through there now. And my assumption is that people living in this new neighborhood so close to very well-known cycling paths and just routes, you're gonna have, I would hope, you're gonna have a lot of increased cycle activity. And so taking that into consideration, as well as with how that interacts with Fitzroy Road, which can be challenging with the hills. And
When is the timeline for shutting the ramps? What have you heard on that for shutting the
Well,
ramps at Seminole?
it's out there. It's whenever we get a governor that wants to do it, and can get the money to do it.
Because I mean, that could have a pretty drastic impact, because if you can't, it's a nice place, but if you can't get here, it makes a big difference.
On the cross of the trails, one of the things, Edgewood College, one of the things we've been watching is as Seminole and the roundabout has been done and everything, noticing more foot traffic and bike traffic evening and night now on the trails, which frankly is a little scary as we're looking to build the athletic complex out there, because there's no lighting on it. So that may be something we want to think about as there's more, more stuff happens there. There's going to be more bike and pedestrian traffic in the evenings and night. That's, like even the other night, just as a side note, I was driving over there just to look at something, and it was 9 o'clock at night, and there were probably 8-9 bicyclists flying through there on the racing bikes on the trail crossing the road. And no lighting at all. They have their little lights.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Yeah, they have their little lights.
I'm sure they stopped before they crossed.
Oh, no, they didn't. They did not. But fortunately, they had their little headlamps on, so it was good. But that would be something that we're only going to get more of that, and which is great. We want to encourage more of that, but now all of a sudden it will impact evenings, early mornings before work rides, that kind of thing.
I want to be sure we give an opportunity for Steve or Chad or Brian to speak up about kind of long-term thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I can go. On the school district side, big ideas in 20 years from now. I think our attendance area in the King James Way area of Fitchburg, where for the last 40 or 50 years we've been busing what really are our marginalized Black and brown students into the Verona area school district, is the remnant of short-sighted urban planning, where we didn't set aside any land or park space for a school or any community improvements to support those families. And I think the city of Fitchburg has kind of paid for that, and so is the school district. So long-term on the school district side, if there's going to be enough rooftops here for even what would eventually be 300 or 400 elementary school students, I'd certainly like to see some property set aside for a school district site, potentially an adjoining park space, and would certainly echo many of the comments around bike transportation and walking to an eventual school site, where I think over the next 20 years, things like carbon footprint and a green way to get to school is going to be more and more important. And I think some wise planning in terms of what the space eventually turns out to be in terms of a walking neighborhood school. Love all the ideas around, some type of urban farm area or urban farmers market, and making sure we are connecting bike paths and safe walking trails. All makes sense, but on the school district side, it would be a miss for us if we end up with 400 or 500 new households there and end up busing students all over the school district, and continue to kind of repeat what happened historically.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, I'll jump in, thanks. I feel like I'm mostly in a listening mode, being the regional representative here. But, from that perspective, I like a lot of what you all are saying, what I'm hearing, in terms of touching on some of the goals or principles that we look at from a regional perspective, the multimodal, choices in terms of ways to get around that are at least within the context of that area. Obviously, you're not getting transit there, but the biking and walking to complement the driving and the accessibility of biking and walking and accessibility to uses for those modes as well as with cars. Again, from a regional perspective, 20 years from now, it'd be nice to see development on both sides of the Fitchburg and Verona side complementary and working together and coordinated together. And that's something that we emphasize a lot at the regional scale. The themes of sustainability were liked a lot, both in terms of the connection to the land and the productivity, the production on the land. There's some other examples even within the county of efforts in that direction, like on the far east side of Madison, a development underway to make what they call an agri-hood, a neighborhood focused around some type of agricultural production. If you want to learn more about it, my sister is leading that project, so and a lot of talk about stormwater, and I think that's both a challenge and an opportunity to increase what we might call climate resiliency by increasing the capacity for the land to absorb water and hold it through green infrastructure and other means like that. Maybe I'll add that a couple other sustainability considerations. One is, the city Fitchburg is one of the only communities in the county that has adopted a tree ordinance, and looking at how that can be applied to ensure a healthy tree canopy in this area that also creates benefits for the residents and reduces energy cooling costs and things like that. And then finally, making the area solar ready, ready and suitable for solar photovoltaics. And I think the village of McFarland is looking at concept of a 100% electric neighborhood, that could be mostly fed with, renewable electricity. You have the O'Brien Fields right near there. So those are just some other things I'll throw out there for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Brian, care to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I apologize. This was sort of information overload for me because this is my first foray into anything city planning. So really fascinating just to see everything that goes into it. I will say I'll kind of echo some of the points with regards to accessibility, especially to trails and walking to schools. That sort of influenced our decision in the biggest way to move to the Stoner Prairie neighborhood was being able to walk our kids to school and access to the Badger State Trail right there. And so I know I heard some other points about green space too. And I just on a personal note, like I think I could forego green space as long as I have accessibility to trails and accessibility, like the ability to get to green space within a reasonable distance. So again, I know nothing about city planning, but it feels like it maybe doesn't have to be forced into city planning as long as it's accessible. I don't know if that's a salient point to contribute to that, but again, there's a lot for me to sort of sift through from this meeting because it's all sort of new to me.
We welcome your perspective, Brian, coming in as someone who doesn't look at this stuff typically, because I think that's important. Your perspective on like how you're seeing the draft materials as we prepared and your feedback on whether or not we're communicating things effectively is going to be really valuable to us.
Great, thanks.
Carol, you look like you had something
Well, I
earlier.
was just gonna ask, to the point about, it's great for us to come up with ideas of land uses and things we'd like to see in there, but there's always that commercial component that requires somebody else's capital. Would it make sense to have Mike Zimmerman come to one of our meetings and talk about, what he's hearing from the outside when people are coming in and asking, do you guys have a site available? Or even when we're talking about the commercial sites that we'll probably have as part of this. I know that one of the things that kept coming up is that we didn't have sites that were large enough to fit some of the uses that were trying to come into Fitchburg. So maybe just to have, and obviously for a 20-year vision, who knows? Amazon changed everything in 2 years. But at least maybe get an idea of what types of businesses are looking to come here, what kinds of uses, what they see the future of that is. I'm sure that, he attends things about economic development, that they might have some future insights that we don't have.
Mike would be willing to come. We've been keeping him in the loop on the staff level meetings, so he'd be definitely willing to come to a steering committee meeting. I'll work with MSA on where which meeting that would make the most sense. But yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So I think once we have an understanding for, how much of this are we expecting, once we get at least a sketched out plan, is how much of this 260 acres is expected to be open space, how much of it's expected to be residential, and which categories of residential, and then, are we gonna try to do mixed use, are we gonna be doing, business uses, industrial uses? I mean, obviously we've got industrial to the north already, but what do we want this to look like? And what does the city want? I think, if we have good guidance from the city as to at least, you're looking to get this many rooftops, it gives us an easier plan of, okay, well, where are we gonna put it?
Another thing that'd be interesting to tie onto that is, I don't know what the explosion cost of construction is done. So like single family and some of that stuff, I don't know where that ends up going, because I know it's just gone through the roof. I'm just glad my house is 26 years old and I don't plan on doing anything anytime soon, but I got enough, friends and family there trying to buy something, and they start talking about, houses.
Rent.
$600,000, $700,000, $800,000 for what I built my house for $100,000 for. So it's just, I don't know how that impacts and plays into that, Carol. That'd be interesting to, if anybody's got any.
Knowing when that's gonna end either, really, right now.
Yeah, we'll probably never know there, it's just, but it will probably factor what is gonna drive the growth or not growth to, I think, where you were getting at, Carol, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think, in our work, we certainly see that there's been, what we expect is a long-term permanent transition in the balance between owner and rental, and between detached and attached, where there's fewer owner, there's fewer detached, and there's, more people that are comfortable for longer in their lives, or for some people their entire lives, renting. And that there are more forms that are attached housing. But that doesn't take away from, there's still people with the desire and the means for detached homes too. So I expect, we talk about complete neighborhoods a lot, and I expect to see the full range. If we're gonna have a neighborhood here, it's gonna be with the full range of housing types.
Yep, I think we've talked about the missing middle for the last 20 years, and the missing middle is still missing. We've put up a lot for people in, the 60 to 80% and the 40% of the median poverty levels or whatever, the income levels. But there really isn't a space for people that make between probably 60 or 70,000 and 120,000, because now they can't buy a house anymore. I mean, the whole economy has shifted, and I don't think that the housing market has shifted along with it. And with the materials cost and the construction cost and the labor costs going up, even when you look at trying to find an apartment in Madison right now, or this entire area, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, you're talking $2,400.
Yeah.
And who can afford that?
And I don't think it's an issue here, but, and I don't even know how this plays in, but do you have a problem in this area with rentals like Verbo and Airbnb and that kind of stuff, or not? I would imagine not, but there's a lot of areas outstate that people are buying up and they're just renting everything. It's causing havoc in communities, but I don't know if that's an issue here or not, so.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's not a big.
Pretty much owner
Fitchburg.
occupied, so, okay.
I think I actually pulled an inventory from Verbo or something in Verona. I think there's 70-something homes in Verona area, I think, when you look online. There was, not too long ago.
And the only reason I bring that up is because a lot of times people are paying top dollar for those and renting them out, and then it shoots all your planning.
Right.
Too, if you don't have corresponding ordinance that goes with rentals or something like that for that type of stuff, so.
Well, I'm gonna do a time check here and note that it's just after 7, so want to respect everyone's time and just touch base on bringing up that schedule again. A little hard to read there, but again, we're planning to meet in December. And I don't have the full agenda in mind. Steve would know better than I would actually, but I know that we're gonna be kind of reflecting on what we've learned from the interviews so far. I'm not sure if that public forum is going to be before or after the meeting. I think after. So the public input forum in December is intended for December. Or did we push that?
No, that one we do have scheduled for December 4th, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
So that one is scheduled. I'd almost anticipate. Yeah, I guess if we're meeting in December, there's not many days before that, but it'll be probably around that, so.
So I'm going to be a little bit circumspect here and say this generally is how the project is going to flow. We're going to get back to you to confirm the timing of the next meeting because we're still kind of actively discussing how we fit things into the holiday season and get the most out of our opportunities for people to get involved. So I would say that we'll have some follow-up communications to confirm details of the next meeting.
And I intend to send out some sort of scheduling poll to all the committee members so I can get a better understanding of what does and doesn't work for everyone. You notice that there's at least one person that wasn't able to attend tonight, so be on the lookout for that.
Oh, so it's a good thing we're done.
Yeah, right. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll look to schedule the second meeting soon. So
Thank you, everyone. I didn't directly force everyone to say specifically their vision, but there will be lots of opportunity for kind of reflecting on what you'd like to see and reflecting on the learning that we're gonna do together here over the next
I'll pull the
year.
plan commission too at our next meeting and see if they have any ideas.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Be terrific, Carol. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.